In the words of the great Benjamin Franklin, an investment in education pays the best interest. Good afternoon, classmates and professor. My name is Kayla Lee, and tonight I'll be discussing why you should support the private school voucher program in your state, as well as how private school vouchers drive down educational costs, increase private school diversity, as well as increase the test scores of public school students that transfer to private schools, as well as increase the college acceptance rates as well as the college duration length for public school students that transfer to private schools, as well as increases parental satisfaction in the educational system and gives parents educational choices for their child. The first thing we're going to discuss is how the private school voucher program cuts expenses. So as most people know, the public school incurs lots of expenses as it relates to a student putting them in any brick and mortar public school. On average, a school will spend $15,000 to $20,000 per pupil in the public school system per year. So they'll spend between $15,000 and $20,000 per year on average. And compared to the private school voucher program that spends $12,000 on average per pupil per year. And the reason why there's discrepancies in the price for the public school brick and mortar schools to the private school voucher program has a lot to do with infrastructure and educational costs. And those educational costs include instructional salaries, which is here, that's the blue. So a big chunk of the per pupil cost is incurred through instructional salaries. We have instructional benefits. That includes like insurance, health insurance, all those kind of costs. So that's included in that cost. And then the little gray section is instructional support. We have general admin and school admin and other. So other could be electricity. It can be electricity, electric, water, food, all of those things that you need in order to educate a student. Those are additional costs incurred by the public school system. So how that differs from the private school voucher program is that schools do not have to take on those instructional costs. So they're not having to pay the teachers, they're not having to pay the lights, they don't have to pay the rent, the electric bill, all those different bills that are incurred when a public school is put into place. Those costs are pushed onto the private school, and the public school is responsible for paying the child's tuition. So that's how it brings down educational costs, by removing all the infrastructure and educational costs associated per pupil in the public school system. So that's how the private school voucher program brings down educational costs. Another thing the private school voucher program does is increases diversity. So throughout this speech, I will be citing some important statistics, and the studies that I get those statistics from will be linked in the references, but I wanted to say the names of them. The first one is the Thomas Fordman Institute is one, and the Pearson Educational Choice study. I may be wrong about the name of it, but it'll be linked in the references. But that's where I'm getting the statistics from, if you're wondering. And these are studies that were done in multiple states, including New York, Maryland, New Jersey, different states around the United States that implement the private school voucher program, and basically pull statistics to compare the private school to public. So that study found that in a school in Commonwealth, that one private school in particular was predominantly Caucasian. After the implementation of the private school voucher program in that school system, that diversity increased by 60%. So 60% of students were minorities. Compared to a predominantly Caucasian school, it became 60% minority after the implementation of the private school voucher program. Another thing that the private school voucher program does is it can also increase test scores. So in the same study that I'm citing, it found that it increased testing scores. 6.3% of the students that transfer from the public school to the private school after receiving a voucher, that it increased testing scores by 6.3%, predominantly in minority students. It also found that 6% of students that transferred from the public school to the private school due to the voucher program, they were 6% more likely to be accepted into college and 22% more likely to stay the duration of their college degree, opposed to dropping out compared to their counterparts that were still in the public school system. So it drove up testing scores by 6.3%, it increased diversity by 60%, and it also increased college acceptance rates by 6%, and it increased the college duration stay by 22%. And this is predominantly minority students that were involved in this program. So now we discussed how it increased diversity, it increased testing scores, and it increased college acceptance. The third thing that we're going to discuss is how the private school voucher program increases educational choices and educational satisfaction. So I'm going to use this handy dandy chart just to illustrate something really quick. So here we have a mom with her son. And so every parent has a task when their child turns 4 or 5, depending on when their birthday falls, of where to send their child to school. So if a parent is unable to homeschool, I didn't list this on the chart because I'm talking about educational choices outside the home. So if a parent is trying to find a place to send their child to school that's outside the home, they have the option of public school, charter school, and private school. So private school is a popular option for a lot of parents who want better educational choices for their child. But it's not available to all parents due to the tuition prices. So a family from a lower economic status most likely will not be able to afford the tuition prices of a private school program. And though private schools offer scholarships, they usually do not offer enough to accommodate the amount of students that would like to attend there or may need the services that school is offering. So private school is not an option for a lot of parents because of the cost of tuition. Now talk about charter school. So charter school has been increasing in the United States. Public government-funded charter schools have been increasing in the United States. The problem with charter schools, likewise with private schools, is they usually lack the amount of seats available for all the students that want to attend. So a lot of charter schools have very long waiting lists. They fill up very quickly, and so it may not be an option for a parent to attend a charter school because it may be full, or their school system may not offer one. For example, in the county in which I live in, we have one charter school for children K through 6th grade. So K through 6th grade for the entire county that I live in that has thousands of people. So a charter school is not an option for a lot of parents when looking for places for their child. So they're stuck with their only option being public school because they have to work. They can't educate the child at home. They can't afford the price of tuition. There may not be space at the charter school. There may be no charter schools available. So they're stuck only with the public school option. The problem with this is that it does not give parents a lot of educational choices. A lot of children are confined to the zip code in which they live in, so they're only allowed to attend the school in their zip code. And the problem with that, if we want to dig deeper, is if you live in a low economic area, which means that a lot of money is not being pumped into your economy because a lot of people don't have jobs, they don't make a lot of money at their jobs, then that means a lot of money is not going to be pumped into your schools. So a lot of children end up attending failing schools or schools that don't have enough economic resources to properly accommodate them because they are of a lower economic status. So the beauty of the private school program is that it gives parents educational choices because they have the freedom to get a scholarship, which basically what the private school voucher program is a scholarship and it's a sum. And the parent is allowed to bring that private school voucher to all the schools that accept it. So it opens up the web of educational choices so much wider than it would be if it wasn't available. So if public school is their only option, and specifically the public school that's in their zip code. So it opens up this whole web of opportunities for parents that they would not have if it had not been for the private school voucher program. I also wanted to reference an important study they did. It was called the Friedman Educational Choice Foundation did a study on parents in different states and asked them about how satisfied they were with the private school voucher program and the reasons why they liked it. And the top 3 reasons why they decided they liked it was better academics, better morals, and religious teachings, and gave them educational choices. So educational choices was one. They liked the fact that it gave the private school voucher program gave them educational choices. They liked the fact that they had schools, they had access to schools that had better academics. And the third thing was that they liked the fact that they had access to schools with better morals, moral teaching, or religious teaching. So for example, if a parent was Christian, they could have the option to go to Christian school, or even if they were non-religious, to have access to schools that were religious, just to give their child foundational teachings. So that's the 3 reasons that they loved the schools. Most people see the education of a child to be the parental right, and so when parents only have access to one public school in their zip code, it can strip them of their educational right as a parent, which is not in the government's place to do. So if they're paying school taxes into their community, one may think they should have the right to have access to different educational choices opposed to just one public school for elementary, middle, and high. So with all the great things I just told you about how it increases diversity, it increases test scores, it increases acceptance rate, parental satisfaction, there are still people that disagree with the private school voucher program. And in the research that I did, the top 3 reasons that I found that people resist the private school voucher program, number 1 being that it can violate a student's civil rights. And this really refers to the religious portion of it, that the fact that there are religious schools that children can attend with their private school voucher, and that by attending a religious school, it can violate that student's civil rights. If that school does not condone certain lifestyles, or doesn't condone certain religions, or doesn't tell the child what they can wear and what they can say, that can be a form of violating their civil rights. Another reason that they cited was that it pulls funding away from the public schools that children need most. That is going to hurt children by pulling funding away from the public schools and putting them into the private voucher program. And the third reason being that the private school voucher program has racist origins, that when it was originally incepted, that it was the purpose of it was to rescue Caucasian children from the public school system so that they could go to these private schools and that the government could fund it. So that the original intention behind the private school voucher program was to rescue Caucasian students out of the public school system and put them into private schools. So my response to those claims would be, starting with the first claim, that it can violate children's civil rights. The beauty of the private school voucher program is that it does give children choices. So a parent can sit with their family and determine what school is the best option for that child. So for example, if a school is a Christian school and you as the parent are not, you as a family are not Christian, you have the choice to say, I don't want my child to attend a Christian school, and take your voucher to another program. Unlike children that are in the public school system that are religious and are not allowed to practice their religion in the public school system because of separation of church and state, they now have the beauty to choose which environment they want to be in. And a lot of public schools actually violate children's civil rights by suppressing their religious values and teaching against certain points of view. So the public school system can violate students' rights, and it actually systematically, as it relates to disabilities and special needs and IEPs, a lot of schools lack the proper accommodations for children's IEPs and disabilities that they have. So that a lot of school systems are already violating children's civil rights as it relates to religion, proper accommodations, and inclusion. So I don't see how having a private school voucher would violate that anymore. And the beauty is choice, that parents have the choice to make that for the child, or what environment they want them in. And if they disagree with a school's values or their teachings, then they don't have to send their child there. On the second point, that said that it diverts funding away from the children that need it most in the public school system. We kind of already discussed earlier how actually private school vouchers actually bring down educational costs per pupil significantly, significantly can bring down. So that's like 3,000 or 4,000 per child that the school system is saving that they can invest in other places, such as the children that want to remain in the public school system. So it actually breaks down educational costs, which means we can invest more money into our public school system. And the second reason is a lot of public school systems that have millions and millions of dollars being poured into them are still failing. If you look at states like such as California, where they have, I think, 46% of fourth graders can even read at grade level, statistics like that, when you have millions and billions being poured into our public school system, but yet we still have so many systems, especially in lower economic and urban areas where the students are unable to read, write, or not performing at grade level, or at they're not testing at the grade level that they're at. We have teachers who protest because they're not being paid adequate wages, and all of these other issues that occur because there is a lack of funding. It makes you wonder, would we actually be better off if more students left the public school system, went to private schools, drove down educational costs so that we can invest that remaining money back into the public school system so that we can pay teachers more and we can provide more services for the children that remain in the public school system, opposed to being overrun with millions of students that have millions of needs and having to pay $10,000 to $20,000 per student, or $15,000 to $20,000 per student, and not being able to significantly meet their needs. And on the third point that I mentioned, that it has racist origins. There are many government programs and organizations that have racist origins and racist ideologies at their foundation. Planned Parenthood is a great example. Planned Parenthood was actually built on a eugenics ideology that the original intention was to actually wipe out minorities, but yet many people use that service today, as well as the public housing program, which original intention was to drive minorities and lower economic people out of the city into slums, away from those who are higher economic status, specifically Caucasian people. That's the original intention of the housing program, yet millions of people participate in it today. And I could go on and on and on about different organizations that have racist ideologies or foundations, but yet we still use those services today. So using that defense against the use of private school vouchers is really not valid, because if we invalidated that program because of its racist ideologies, we would have to evaluate so many others that exist and tell people not to use those either. So that kind of covers those three reasons for opposition against the private school voucher program. So in conclusion, a private school voucher program is a great thing to support, especially the one in your state, because like I said, it brings down educational costs, which can invest more money into our public school system in a roundabout way. It gives children of lower economic status, specifically minority children, a chance to perform at the same level as their counterparts that have access to private schools. It also increases parental satisfaction, and it increases the parental choices available to parents who have children ages K through 12. It's a great thing to support. And if you're interested in supporting your private school voucher, a great place to start is by just doing research on what exists in your area and finding out ways you can support it, either by writing to your local congressman or senator, and just advocating for policies that support school choice in general, specifically the voucher program. And you can even, as an individual, see there's organizations that actually accept donations in order to create scholarships for students in the public school system to attend private schools. So that's another thing you can do as an individual if you're interested in helping students rise up out of poverty and escape failing schools, is that you can, as an individual, invest in private school vouchers. So I thank you so much for listening. I hope this was informative and persuades you to get involved in the conversation. I hope that you have a good day and that this is just invoke some thought and self-reflection. Have a good night. Bye-bye.